Forbes. John's been a great mentor and supporter and leader with us for several years now. And partnered with him on this webinar about 5 essential leadership practices. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to John Forbes. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Kevin. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I'm in a hotel room in Boston with a head cold, so forgive me. But I appreciate you all taking the time to be with us today. I'll move quickly through this content and be open to questions and insights that you might have from the content. So I want to make the case for associations to develop leadership. And I want to also show you about 5 essential leadership practices that can help us all in our leadership journey. In the bottom, you can see that currently I am a principal of Balanced Growth Consulting, and we consult in healthcare and associations. And last year I formed my own company, Forbes Management Consulting, and that's where I do the leadership work such as this particular webinar. So the agenda is basically twofold: making the case for associations to invest in leadership and speaking about the 5 leadership essentials. These are images from the American Academy of Pediatrics, where I worked for 10 years. When I walked into that building every day, I had a bounce in my step because I knew I was doing something to help our members help children. So the question is, what is your why? Why are you in your organization? What is your purpose? And can you advance the mission? Can you advance the cause through your passion and through your leadership? So what is your why is basically the question. In so many organizations that I've worked in, there's a lot of dysfunction. And the question is, why should we develop leaders? Well, here's a short list of reasons. And I'm sure many of you who have worked in different organizations have similar lists and maybe a larger list. But some organizations lack vision, or the leader may have a vision but can't communicate it, so the folks in the organization cannot aspire to achieve the vision that he or she has set up. Oftentimes there's unclear strategy, and the goals are also unclear. So the frontline people are kind of going, what are we here for? And they don't really have alignment to the strategy and the goals. Lack of diversity on certain teams and in certain organizations. I see a lot of in medical societies, for example, with boards that are almost all male. And that's a bit of a issue that needs to be dealt with. Lack of accountability, lack of cooperation across functions. I've seen that in many organizations. Well, I do membership and I don't do meetings, and I do fundraising and I don't do education. So the notion of bringing people together requires a leader to effectively help these organizations reduce those silo effect. There are many cultural issues, performance issues. Many organizations are living in the past. They're change averse, and even individuals are change averse. The values aren't clearly stated. Sometimes they're misaligned. The leader is not walking the talk. Sometimes the leader at the top is just the wrong person. It may be the chair of the board, it may be the chair of a committee, maybe the executive director, maybe the chair of a department or a chair of a task force, but sometimes that leader is wrongly suited for that particular activity. Many organizations have bad actors, folks that just don't want to behave very well, and they disrupt the organization. And it's difficult often with the competition in the human resource marketplace to attract the right talent to associations. So this is just a list that I've been familiar with, and you may have a list of others that you've been connected to in various organizations. But the purpose of this slide is to really kind of underline and underscore why it's necessary to develop leadership in associations. We see dysfunctions in teams very often. I've used this slide in a number of other settings, but so often we see a result like this when there's misalignment of values and unclear goals are established. In a straw poll of 55 association leaders that Ken Slaw and I did last summer, we asked the question, where is your organization in terms of providing leadership development for staff, volunteers, and your board members? Just a straw poll, hands raised. And what we found in that audience was that 20% of the audience are nowhere. They are not doing anything in leadership development. About 70% of the audience are somewhere. They're on the starting of a journey, or they're maturing in their leadership development profile. And about 10% of the audience are everywhere. They're just all in. They're committed. It's a value of the organization. It's a strategic priority. They're putting resources into it. And I'll speak to a couple of those later in the presentation. This work is done from work done by Kouzes and Posner in the Leadership Challenge. They found that they have a score sheet. When they have their sessions, they have these 20 items that they ask people to rate the leadership characteristics that they're familiar with. And they give each person 7 choices out of those 20. For the last 30 years, over about 2 million respondents in 72 countries, the top 4 have always been the case. Regardless of context or content, these top 4 have always been the case. And I've underlined these in this next slide to speak about the 4 leadership characteristics. So being honest is about integrity and telling the truth. Being forward-looking is having a sense of direction. Being inspiring is sharing your enthusiasm. And being competent is ability to get things done. So when you're looking at hiring people or promoting people, make sure that they have these 4 ingredients for their success. Years ago, I served on the board of the Lutheran Hour Ministries, and they had the board do a retreat, and they had a facilitator go through this exercise of what is leadership. And at the end of the day, we had to do a forced scoring, and we came up with 3 things. And I remember these clearly. The first one is about integrity. Here you see honest. The second one is about communication, and here you see inspiring. And the third one was vision, and here you see forward-looking. So these things really don't change much. These are the foundational principles of leadership. So leaders earn trust, and these are the 4 cores of credibility. The bottom line is having trust. As you see in this slide, the roots of this tree are beneath the ground. Can't be seen, but that's your character. That's your integrity, and that's your intent. Hard to see because it's below the ground. Competence is above the ground. These are your capabilities, your executive presence, how you behave, how you communicate, how you dress, how you work with teams, how you work in meetings, and the results you achieve. So these are very visible, and they demonstrate your competence. And the question here is, how do you demonstrate your character? And by earning trust and maintaining that trust is the best way to do that. So leadership develops from the inside out. Its impact is measured from the outside in, is what you do to help others in your leadership journey. Patrick Lencioni, many of you have heard about the 5 dysfunctions of a team, has written a book recently called The Ideal Team Player, in which he has 3 domains: humble, or being humble, being hungry, and being smart. Hungry is about going above and beyond, and smart is not about IQ, it's about relational smarts. He has an instrument of 18 questions in these 3 domains. I wish I'd had these 20 years ago when I was hiring people and putting people on teams, because I'd be better able to make better decisions by having this instrument in front of me. But as you think about putting people on teams or task forces or committees, think about, are they humble, are they hungry, and are they smart? The American College of Physician Executives is one of those everywhere organizations fully invested in leadership, and they work on developing their leaders and helping them lead themselves, leading others, leading for results, and leading change. Leadership is not position, title, or power. It's to what end one wields them. What are you doing with your title? What are you doing to help others? How can you help others be successful? Is pointing your knowledge and capabilities to help others advance themselves. I'd like to shift now to the 5 leadership essentials. Again, this work comes from Kouzes and Posner. Some of you have read their work or been involved in their instruments. But again, this is evidence-based, rigorously tested, 30 years of research, about 2 million respondents in 72 countries, as I mentioned before. So the work in the next slides comes from their work. And they do have 5 practices: model the way, inspire a shared vision, challenge the process, enable others to act, and encourage the heart. I had a hard time remembering these things, so I use an acronym called MICE, M-I-C-E-E. That helps me remember what these 5 are. Let's go through each one of these. Modeling the way is really about values and actions, the alignment between how you act and what your stated values are, and having your voice affirm shared values with your organization. Setting the example by aligning actions with shared values. So what do you stand for? Do you keep your promises? So often I found myself saying one thing and not ending up doing what I said I was going to do, which is a failure in my credibility. Inspiring a shared vision is really looking into the future and communicating that vision. Focusing on the future sets leaders apart. Frontline people are usually day-to-day. They're in the sort of a 3-month phase. Middle managers are looking forward probably 1 or 2 or 3 years. And executive leadership, those at the top, are looking forward as long as a decade. So being forward-leaning and forward-looking is a very important part of being a great leader. So imagining the future by imagining exciting and ennobling possibilities, and enlisting others who have those aspirations that you have. Challenging the process is all about innovation. Exemplary leaders are always associated with changing the status quo. They do not sit still. They're leaning forward. They're trying to make change, searching for opportunities by seizing the initiative, but looking outward for innovative ways to improve. I will underscore what Sherry and Kevin are doing with the .org community and .org source. They're helping us as association leaders challenge the future by challenging the status quo. So experimenting and taking risks, we have to fail. When we try new things, we must fail. Failure is all about learning. Enabling others to act is all about teams, creating high-performing teams and cultures. And leadership is a team sport. It's not a solo effort. Nothing I ever got done was done by myself. It was through other people. So fostering collaboration by building trust and facilitating relationships. Strengthening others by increasing self-determination and developing their competence. So you're helping others. This is about helping others be successful, advancing their capabilities and their skills so they can be successful. One of my proudest moments in my leadership journey is the people that I have led before who are in positions of unbelievable leadership roles today. One of them is the head of the entire American Red Cross blood program. It's a $2 billion operation, but he worked for me, and I'm just so proud to see him advance in his career. So as you think about your leadership legacy, is who have you helped advance and move forward to be successful? Last is encouraging the heart, which is all about recognition. Leadership is an affair of the heart. Great leaders love their constituents, love the mission, love their customers, and recognizing contributions by showing appreciation for individual excellence and celebrating the values and victories by creating a spirit of community. When I first was introduced to these 5 principles, I used their 30-question score sheet, and I rated myself fairly high and challenged the process because I was new to the organization. I didn't care. I could just go ahead and say anything and challenge the status quo. But in that same survey, I rated fairly low in encouraging the heart. My staff are saying to me, we need you to step into our roles and help us be more successful. I took that as a great opportunity to learn. And when I took the same assessment tool with which my peers and my subordinates scored as well, a year later, I had improved in this area of encouraging the heart, where I could help my staff be better recognized in advance and feel better about their roles. Another one of these everywhere organizations is AMSPDEC, and they have a pediatric leadership development program. And these are the chairs and incoming chairs of about 120 children's hospitals around the country. And I was asked to facilitate a leadership development program for them over a couple of years. So they have a group of people from this year, the 2018 cohort, and a group of people from last year, the 2017 cohort, who are now in their second year. And I'll show you how they've advanced. So we use the leadership practices inventory with the LPI 360. which is a 360-degree leadership assessment tool, which scores yourself on 30 items and other observers on 30 items about your leadership. And so in the case of these two cohorts, they had about 10 people reporting on their leadership. So managers and direct reports and coworkers on a scale of 1 to 10. So that the LPI provides a group assessment report of all the various participants, and each individual receives a data summary of their 5 practices: modeling the way, inspiring a shared vision, etc., and how they scored themselves, and how each of the observers scored them, and then they have an average. They also plotted this in a bar chart to see how the individual scored, and then they have provide each individual a group leadership behaviors ranking. So of those 30 questions, which are the most frequently communicated by the observers and which are the least frequent? So in the top right on this slide, you can see those. I've noted 5 at the top, and at the bottom right, you see I've noted 5 at the bottom. And let me speak to each of these in the group leadership behaviors ranking. So of all the observers, the ones that were rated most frequent, the top 5, are these people who were rated: treat people with dignity, they enable others to act, develop cooperative relationships, they set example of what he or she expects, follow through on promises, and speak with conviction and purpose. The least frequent, let me start at the bottom, is asks for feedback. This is something that everybody is pretty weak in, and all the data that Kouzes and Posner show that this is a common weakness. When I was doing performance reviews, I was asked 2 questions of my staff. One is, how am I doing? How do you think I'm doing? And 2, how are we doing? You and I, how are we doing? How can I be better? So I always ask those questions, seeking feedback on how I can improve as a leader to help them be successful. But there are many other examples of ratings that are least frequent. The group percentile ranking of the 2 cohorts is shown here. And what this shows is how the various observers rated these individuals. In this group of 2 cohorts, they rated themselves fairly low. The self-rating in the blue line is fairly low. Their managers rated them fairly high. But the black dots here is their coworkers. And here's where I think there's a lesson to be learned. Their coworkers are saying, you could model the way better. Your alignment between actions and vision could be better. And you could enable others to act or perform in teams better. So if I was this group of pediatricians, I would try to improve in these 2 particular areas so I could score better the next time. The 2017 cohort came back the second year and did used the same instrument with the same observers and had amazing results. Their average scores increased by what you see in the column on the right. These are statistically significant improvements in their scores. The one leader one in enabling others to act, I spoke to her and she said, why did this one go down? And I said, let's take a look at last year's score compared to this year's score. She scored like a 58 last year, and this year was a 57. So I said, not to worry, you're scoring very, very high. You can only score a 60, so don't worry about that one. But I was amazed at the results. And what they did during this year was they formed a peer group of themselves. They had monthly phone calls. They challenged each other to understand what they're doing to lead pediatricians and staff in their hospitals. And they worked at developing their leadership over the course of the year. And that is why these leadership scores increased. So the leadership difference is when you invest in these 5 practices, you will achieve better results versus those who engage in them less frequently. So I encourage you to learn about these 5 practices and go ahead and start to work those in your particular journey to become better leaders. Some practical exercises that you can use include, tell us about you can work your teams. You do this as exercise with your teams. Tell us about your personal best leadership experience. If I was to be asked that question in a group, I would answer that by saying that I coached kids for 19 years. And I learned a whole lot more about leadership coaching kids than I ever learned from leadership books or leadership courses. That's one of the experiences I had as a leader. Who are your most admired leaders? Be another question you could do with your teams. I've answered this question a couple of ways. First time I had this question, I answered Ronald Reagan, because what he did with détente a number of years ago. And I also answered the question, my mom, the most outstanding leader I've ever known in my life. For newly established teams, you can use icebreaker exercises to get to know each other. You can develop an operating agreement or a social contract and rules of behavior for your leadership team and board. Discover your values using a forced scoring approach. The way this tool works is you have a list of values, maybe there's 50 values, and you will actually rate the top 10, and you'll re-rate those 10 to the top 5, and you re-rate those to the top 3, and you'll know exactly where your values are. Using Patrick Lencioni's instrument to determine the ideal team player, which I talked about before. Taking the LPI self to scoring system assessment tool to gain insights into your own leadership strengths, and learn together. With your teams, invest in sharing what you're learning about your leadership journey, helping others who are working with you to expand their knowledge and capabilities as leaders. A few takeaways. Be obsessive with what is best for others, not what is best for yourself. You can't fast track your way to excellence. It requires deliberate practice, those 10,000 hours that we learn about. Leadership is about what you do, not who you are or what position you have. Do what you say you will do. And the best leaders are the best learners, so continue to invest in your leadership journey. In closing, great leaders get extraordinary things done. So where you are today, transition by learning to get to a better place. By doing so, you can help others transform values into actions, visions into realities, obstacles into innovations, separateness into solidarity, and risks into rewards. You'll have outstanding results by pursuing your own personal leadership journey and helping others develop as leaders. In closing, then, I have a few references and resources that you can tap into, and some more for you. But if you ever need to reach me with any questions or would like me to just take an email, please feel free to reach me at any time. I thank you for your participation. I hope this has been helpful to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, John. We'll take some questions, but before we do, just a couple of other logistics. So I will distribute these slides, also the link to the recording, and a link to the recording on the org community TV channel, so you can have access to that. And for those of you tracking CAE, I can also send out the CAE certificate for 0.5 credits for today. So again, John, thank you very much. And as maybe folks are digesting the material or coming up with a question, so one of the questions I had was back on that straw poll slide, there's a high degree between the commitment to leadership development. So what can be done to move that nowhere group to the somewhere group? And then what is that everywhere group doing that's so different and to distinguish it itself?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kevin. The nowhere group is really not understanding that leadership is a big difference maker in their journey, or they're too busy with managing their work and their processes. But by just stepping into some reading, some webinar participation, just speaking about leadership, attending sessions, that would help them. In the somewhere group, it's a wide range of we're just getting started to we're quite mature. continuing to make investments, working your boards, having leadership on your board agenda, having leadership retreats with your staff, sharing readings together where you might take a book and do a little book resource between each other, and passing nuggets back and forth about your leadership journey. Oftentimes you might take a day and a half and do a whole leadership exercise. We would take our entire staff, not our entire staff, our entire board with pediatrics. We took them to Toronto, spent 2 days. All we did was leadership development. We took our staff, about 70 people at a time, because we had about 400 staff, and took them through a day and a half worth of leadership developments. So some of the tools and exercises we used, they started to be able to work with within the organization. Those organizations that are everywhere are just over the top with, this is about their culture. This is about making big investments in a big play to develop leaders. It's a core competency of the organization. They put dollars and funding into it, and they speak it every single day. They're very rare, but they're very, very important. And those organizations, you will find, will have greater success than those who are not investing in leadership.
Okay, and I guess maybe related, on that LPI scores from, I think it was this 2017 cohort, you showed us that there was a significant improvement. So what else did that group do to get that improvement? You said there were a lot of meetings and phone calls, and
Right.
what other things that they do to get that drastic improvement?
Yes, a great question, Kevin. They have a curriculum, a leadership curriculum that has a whole lot of materials, articles and books and references. And they have their chairs, the people who are leading the PDLP are actually hosting them on monthly calls to take questions from the cohort groups. But the cohort groups themselves form their own peer group. And they would have monthly calls amongst themselves to say, what are your challenges? What are you learning? How are you helping others lead? So they were intentional about working together and understanding the principles, these 5 principles, and advancing them for themselves and helping their peers advance. And that's why you saw those results move remarkably up from one year to the next.
Okay, and then a question that just came in here is about alignment. So how do you align the staff leadership or the management, I think it is, with the board when there's some bad actors on both sides?
That's a great question. Again, Kevin, a difficult question, because one of the things that I've used, and very successfully, was that operating agreement. I had the board and I had my executive staff sit down and agree on the rules of engagement, the rules of behavior, a social contract amongst each other. So, and that might be, we have an equal voice. It might be mutual respect. It might be, we will arrive on time and we will stay to the agenda. There's whatever those organizations construct becomes the social contract. And when I used it with my board, and I had bad actors on my boards, someone had the ability to raise their hand to say, time out. We have an operating agreement that we all signed off on, and we agreed that we would respect each other. And those last comments were not respectful. So I want to raise my hand and call timeout and have us make sure that we're aligned with that operating agreement. Every single board meeting, that operating agreement lived right below the agenda. If the agenda was the first page, the second page was the operating agreement. And that reminded them every time that they had a contract with each other to behave and align their behaviors. Same thing can work with staff. What I would do on a regular basis is pull out that operating agreement and ask the question, are we complying with what we have agreed to in this contract? Can we improve how we behave? Can we improve how we work together? And you often see people saying, yeah, we could do better over here. Let's add this item to the operating agreement. So it's a very dynamic tool that helps create alignment and helps create understanding that there are rules of engagement.